Rip.
Hey, fuck the NRA! Hey, fuck y'all! Fuck the
Look at him.
NRA!
Look at him. Actually, look at him.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down!
So I attended the NRA convention day 2. This time I went with my wife. We had a blast. Day 1, I was by myself. Met a friend there, and that's where we walked all the booths. But day 2, wife, like I said, had a blast. Saw some really cool stuff, like some concealed carry options. Tons of training. And we talked about solutions. That's where I left off on my ride home yesterday, talking about solutions. So I brought up the ability to involuntarily potentially commit people, and then the hesitancy behind it and the difficulty, because it's a complex issue when you're talking about people's rights. You can't just throw somebody in an insane asylum or an institution or a mental health facility without their consent. You can do it, but it's short term. There's no long term solution if you go that route, unless we bring back the laws of the 60s and 70s. And the reason we went away from those is because of human rights, civil rights. People have, we're adults. We have the presumption of innocence, and that's a tricky one. It really is. So it takes people much smarter than myself to figure out, exactly how to do that. And I don't think those people are in politics. I think that's a private sector solution that would have to be figured out. I think we need to talk about the actual guns, because I touched on it. People don't understand when they start saying assault weapons, assault rifles, weapons of war. That's not what's happening. I mean, it's not what. When we see a mass shooting, people assume that happens a lot, but it's really around 1% of all gun incidences. It's terrifying because when you have a person come in and kill a lot of people at once, it makes you think that it can happen at any time, when the reality is it's about the same thing. You know what happens? A lot of people that I know won't go into the ocean. It's because they're afraid of sharks. They don't want to get bit by a shark. Terrifying when it happens, but it really does not happen very often. It's extremely rare. That's about the same when you're talking about mass shootings. It doesn't happen very often. Doesn't make it less terrifying. But when we see it, and when the media portrays it the way they do, they're really targeting guns. They're not targeting the issue, which is the mental illness or the crazy people who are actually pulling these things off. So I was going to talk about a couple more solutions, but I really wanted to touch on guns. If you asked people if they really think that banning the AR-15 or rifles, I think that they would tell you that it would make a dent in homicides and mass shootings. Well, considering that mass shootings only make up 1% of homicides in this country, anything you do can put a dent in that number. It's not that many. And I think a lot of people will say it's the AR-15 that's causing these problems. It's assault weapons, which is just absolute nonsense. Um, trying to think of the last time somebody actually used an assault weapon, an assault rifle, in a mass shooting. It may have been in Vegas, out the hotel. Never got the full story on that, by the way. Wonder what happened there in Vegas. The guy shooting out the window at a bunch of country concert goers, country music concert goers. Doesn't seem like something a conservative would do, or a white supremacist. Maybe that's why we don't know what happened there. Curious, very curious. That's probably the last time, and I'm not even sure he had any assault, because I remember he used bump stocks. So those were semi-automatic rifles. I think people just see an AR-15 and think that it's an assault rifle when it's a rifle. It's not a weapon of war. It's not military grade. All that. Anytime you hear the media saying those things, you know they don't own any weapons. They don't own any guns. But the reality is, out of all shootings, rifles account for at least in 2020. These are the most recent stats. These were pulled in 2021, late 2021 for the year before. That's usually how they do it. Rifles accounted for 455 murder victims. If you asked a leftist or anyone who doesn't know anything about guns, they would probably say, oh my gosh, that's a lot of people. But it really isn't. When you think about how many people die to, let's say, knives. Just over 1,700 people die from knives, stabbings each year. I've never seen a protest about knives. Never once. If you talk about hands and feet and fists, elbows, the human body, 662 people died in 2020 from just being beaten to death. So when you hear somebody say, well, we get rid of these rifles, that'll stop mass killings and that'll stop what's happening. It may stop somebody from going in and killing a lot of people at once, but there was a time where we had more serial killers. And they would kill 10, 15, 20, up to 40 people. They just do it slowly. They have the ability to carry out those psychotic wishes much faster now. But it's not being done by rifle. It's not, because handguns accounted in 2020 accounted for over 8,000 homicides, murder victims. This is not including suicide. Like a lot of the stats you'll get, they include suicide in it to make it sound a lot worse. They'll say 17,000 or 15,000 people died at the hands of guns, but they don't separate suicide. They don't separate accidents. So what I'm giving you right now is murder victims and homicides, and as defined as one person or more than one person taking another person's life with whatever the weapon is. So I thought it was very interesting that 455 versus over 8,000, and they want to ban the thing that took 455 lives, and they want to call that a weapon of war. More people die in Chicago each year than they do at war while we were in the theater, this country. That's a literal war zone. But we always get scared of that topic, or black people will roll their eyes. Oh my God, here we go, talking about Chicago. Yeah, because that's real. It doesn't fit your narrative, so you guys run really fast from that topic. but it's always interested me how people run from certain topics, and it just, yeah. So that's covering the weapons. Solutions. I gave I gave what I think would be a better approach to mental illness. But then let's talk about the actual schools themselves. Um, I found it very weird, that we were scared to talk about. I don't even know if it's scared. They just didn't like the idea of some teachers having guns or having armed security in places. Um, I don't understand what the hesitancy is in there. I think they think that the police officer, is just going to turn around and start shooting students. I don't understand what the fear is in that, other than they just don't want that solution. Because I can't think of any other reason why you would be against that. It just makes sense if we have U.S. Marshals on airplanes now, and they're random. But I was told that they're on almost every flight. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know if it is possible. I don't know if it's true. But the fact that we know that it's being done is definitely a deterrent. Because even I have no plans on doing anything. Every time I get on a plane, I look like, I wonder if this person's a marshal. I wonder if this person's a marshal. And I'm just curious. But it's in my head. When you go into a school, whether you attend a school, which overwhelming majority of mass shootings come from somebody who either attended a school or used to attend a school. So they know the staff, they know the drills, they know everything that goes on in the schools. Which is why I would put one armed peace officer per, I don't know, 200 students, maybe per 300 students. Some schools are larger. Upon entering any school, I would funnel people through one entry, a single point of entry, just like they do at the airports. They have multiple points of entry, but you had to go through. Everybody just couldn't go through any door. And a lot of schools you can go through side doors. There's multiple entrances, but there's nobody there. And I don't understand that. Why we protect the airport and the airplane more than we protect the schools. Our kids are there. You can definitely have mass killing in an airplane. You can definitely have mass killing in schools. Why isn't the protection the same? Everybody goes through one door. All other doors are locked from the inside, which means if you're inside and there's an emergency, you can exit. You just can't come in. Makes sense to me. If you've ever been to court, they do the exact same thing. They funnel everybody, especially a federal building, almost any federal building. One point of entry. You go to this door, and whether they have metal detectors or not, doesn't matter. There are armed peace officers, whether they be sheriffs, police, constables, security. They're armed security or peace officers that are at the door that get an eye on everybody who's walking in. Now, if it's a school, you get an eye or two or three or four on an 18-year-old walking into an elementary school. Hey, what's your business here? If he opens up and starts shooting then, all right, we're still preventing kids from being shot at that point, because that's alarming everyone in the building now, and he's not walking in and just starting to shoot kids. Does that make any sense? It makes sense to me. You're only going to get so far, especially if there are other teachers who have concealed carry or have military experience. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to walk into the building with their firearms. They're going to keep it on them. I don't understand the hesitancy from that one. But to my point about single points of entry, it just makes sense. If we do it for the courthouse, we do it for the airport, I don't understand why we don't do it for our schools. My high school did. My high school had issues. There was some race war. Like, there was a time in the 90s where there was a lot of racial tension in Chicago. And there were schools on the west side that were having issues between Hispanics and black people. My school definitely went through that. I'm not going to name the gangs, but there was definitely some racial issues going on, even with gangs that were normally allied. There was a lot of racial tension. We'll just leave it at that. And they locked it down. We had like a police station downstairs, so we had like police officers in our downstairs. But single point of entry. At one point, we ended up having to go through, I think it was metal detectors. I don't remember if there were metal detectors. I think there were. I just remember having to go through, I think it was. Somebody who went to school with me can remind me. It wasn't always like that, but it got like that. As it got worse, we ended up doing that. I really do think it was. There was a lot of issues during those. There was like a 2-year period that really got bad. So you see everyone coming in, and especially when you're talking in 8th grade and under, elementary school. Why is a grown up going in there? Or you see a student, they can't bring a rifle in past this point unless they're coming in shooting, and then what do you really think can be done about something like that? And again, if I'm a security guard, I'd rather the person shooting me or shooting at me than going in and taking out, second graders, first graders. At least it gives me time to do something, or attempt to do something. I just think that's a much better solution, single points of entry. When those hijackers took over those planes for 9/11, immediately we did a couple things. We reinforced the cockpit, every plane, and then we instituted a lot of single point of entry areas through the TSA in airports. So why did I bring up the cockpit? We have a lot of schools where there's no secure area where the kids can go, like the pilots are protected in an airplane. I don't know what the drill would be. I don't know how you would implement this. Again, this is for people much smarter than me, but it's a thought. Maybe the auditoriums can be extremely secured. It's only 2 main doors, and then an exit usually. Maybe that place is impenetrable. Maybe you can, and it's large enough to have the kids. Maybe it would be in the assembly hall. There's usually a long row of doors and then 1 or 2 exits. And I'm just going off of how it was when I was younger. Maybe those doors are extremely reinforced. I don't know. This psychopath apparently got into a classroom, and everything he did took place in one classroom, and he barricaded himself in there. So I'm gonna withhold judgment. I know I brought up those police that they said didn't do anything. Now I'm not sure if they could have done anything, because if you have somebody who's barricaded in, and it's now a hostage situation, and you can't just rush in, because you risk him shooting everybody regardless, which ended up happening. I don't know if there was the hostage situation, but if it was, that explains why the police wouldn't go in the way the parents were expecting them to. It makes a little bit more sense. I don't agree with it, but it makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, back to that. Some kind of fortifying of certain areas in schools where a lot of kids can go to as quickly as possible. Especially if you have, in addition to that, a single point of entry, you start hearing gunshots, you can immediately start working all your kids towards that area of the school. Um, I wouldn't want to make our schools into prisons, but there is a lock system in prisons where doors lock. You can do them all at once. That's a little much for every school. I don't know if that's possible, but I don't know. I don't know. I just think there's more to be thought about than thinking that's taking away guns that account for 445 murders a year. I just don't think it makes any sense. There was an assault weapons ban, a so-called assault weapons ban, and it was ended in the 90s when they realized it didn't make any difference in the amounts of people who were being shot by quote-unquote assault weapons. Why? Because if the day comes where they do one of those buybacks, or we'll stick with the buybacks. If the day comes where somebody does a buyback, the government does a buyback, who's bringing those guns and selling them? They don't even ask questions about the guns. Those guns could be used in a homicide. You're going to give me money for a gun that's probably doesn't work or malfunction at some point, and you're just going to pay me for it? And I already used it to kill somebody? It doesn't make sense. Who's going to really return their guns? Who's going to say, "Ooh, I just bought a AR-15 last year, paid $1,500. I modded it. I put it all together myself. I think I'm going to go sell it back to the federal government." That's not the people who are giving back those guns. It's not. The criminals are giving you back their junk, and they're keeping the stuff that they plan on using. You're giving them a way to give back guns that were used in crimes. Like, it doesn't make sense. The thought process is weird because there's so many assumptions. And the worst assumption is that law-abiding citizens are guilty before proven innocent. That law-abiding citizens are the ones who are killing all these people. That law-abiding citizens are the ones who don't follow the law. And why I say you're assuming that is because if we didn't follow the law, you would know it. There are hundreds. I think they said somewhere between 200 and 300 million legally owned firearms in this country. And that's between just over 100 million Americans. There wouldn't be just 11,000 shootings a year, or whatever the number is. There'll be way more than that. The reason there's not is because I have what I have, and I never have to use it. Unless one of the people who is crazy tries to kick in my front door. And as I said on my other video, I'm not calling the police to help me defend my family. I'm defending my family and calling the police so they can respond. But I just thought it was interesting. Back to the race issue, when a black person does mass shootings, it's not a story, or it goes away really fast. When a white person does it, it's white supremacy. The boogeyman is out to kill all black people. When somebody else does it, like there was an Asian who did a mass shooting, I think he was Chinese, in like a Taiwanese church in California. I don't remember exactly where. Not too long ago, we didn't even hear about that one. You're probably saying, no, that didn't happen. It happened, and that was actually motivated by a Chinese person went in and intentionally went after people of Taiwanese descent. That was a hate crime. I know most conservatives will say, well, isn't every time you try to kill somebody a hate crime? Yeah, but when it's targeted like that, instead of considering just putting people down, death penalty, liberals like to Well, if they're going to be in jail for the rest of their life, let's tack on more years. But if you kill a lot of people, if you kill people, you really should be getting the maximum sentence if they know it was you. That's another tricky one. But I'll save that for another day. But yeah, right now, black males are 15 times more likely to die by way of homicide than a white male. "15 times more likely." And almost 90% of those will die at the hands of another black man. But those are not legal firearms, people. So it impacts my community more than these leftists and liberals who are screaming at me, calling me a murderer. It impacts my community more. Firearms do, illegal firearms. But for some reason, they still think that they have an authority over me, and we know why that is. Because whether they realize it or not, they are racist. At least that claim is. When you need to have authority over me to explain what's best for me, ooh, that's beyond condescending. Because you're making the judgment by race, not just person to person. There's a lot of issues involved in this thing. There's a lot of illegal weapons out there. And for some reason, the liberals want to make laws for the people who will follow the laws. Criminals don't follow laws. That's why they're called criminals. They commit crime. Criminals. It's so weird that they think writing more stuff is going to stop a criminal who commits crimes for a living from doing what they're going to do. They know what they're doing is illegal. So what is you writing down all this stuff? What is that going to do? It's going to keep them from buying guns at a gun show? They don't buy guns The legal guns that are used are way, 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 way outnumbered by the illegal guns that are used. And where do those come from? There's another source. Find out the source where people are getting these illegal weaponry, whether it's down on the southern side of the border, where the United States, under the Obama administration, sent hundreds of thousands of weapons and lost track of all of them. Maybe some of those are coming back. You can sell them. Those were military grade weapons. Fully automatic weapons, not semi-automatic. And there's another buzzword, semi-automatic. When people talk about AR-15, semi-automatic, automatic, whatever they say, most handguns are semi-automatic. That's a revolver. Most handguns are semi-automatic. It's 2022, people. So yeah, just some thoughts. Met some cool conservatives, high-profile conservatives, and the wife got to see protesters and how one side is on the side, like not joking, but just like, wow, these people are serious. Some of them were joking, and how the other side is just screaming and angry and just, it's intense, very intense, very intense. Anyway, that's my thoughts for now on this topic.